Welcome to the F3 podcast.
Hello, my name is Eric Yorath. I'm with FIGURE3 in Toronto, and I'm very excited to be here with these friends. I'm joined today by Charlie Musgrave, Senior Director of Office Leasing at Ivanhoe Cambridge, and Lee Billinkoff, who is Vice Chair of Office Leasing at Cushman Wakefield, and our very own Michelle Berry, who is VP of Corporate Workplace at FIGURE3. And we're here today to expand upon a conversation that we've been having recently on how we're anticipating that the workplace, the post-COVID workplace, or what most people are coining the hybrid workplace, how that will effectively impact how landlords will need to reposition or position their office real estate in order to attract tenants that are thinking about workplace differently. And I thought it might be best to start the conversation with you, Michelle, to just maybe to set the groundwork.
Okay, yeah, great. I'm happy to kick things off. I think what we've learned over the last 15 months, most importantly, is that obviously the importance of the office and the fact that we need the workplace is more important than ever, and it is not dead. What we've been learning most is the importance of the office design and how much harder it's going to need to work in the future. And there are different phases of returning to the office. There will be a slow ramp up. And then moving into some of these new models that we're talking about, you had alluded to the hybrid office. So, and so a lot of those conversations have been taking place over the last 15 months, but more importantly, in the last few months.
And I anticipate that part of that is also sort of an escalated need for importance of attraction and retention of companies. Charlie, I know that one of your big mandates right now is overseeing the CIBC Square project, which is probably I'd say a trailblazer as far as the buildings out there that are representing amenities and a sense of what it is to help tenants attract their employees or to come in or to use the facility. What do you anticipate, or what do you think landlords are starting to think about as far as expanding amenities and the things that are going to attract these new tenants, and the ways that executives are thinking about workplace now?
I think there's a new and added emphasis on certainly adaptability, but adaptability of design and architecture, technological enhancements, seasonal activation around common areas. Outdoor spaces are huge. The enhanced public realm, health, wellness, amenities. Safety is a huge one that we're hearing about from our tenant partners across the continent.
And Lee, being the one in the group here that's probably hearing the most from clients that are starting to think about what they can do with their existing space, or where they need to be looking in the market. Over the last few months and going forward, are you seeing a shift in how, or the questions that your clients are asking, or the interest that your clients are reflecting when they're going to market, or they're looking for real estate?
Yeah, I mean, I think for a while in Toronto, there has been a flight to quality. I mean, Toronto has been pretty progressive in building a lot of new buildings over the last number of years, and those buildings have been at the forefront of being leased up quicker, higher net effective rates, and so forth. But what I think COVID has done is really shined a light on these new developments. And one thing Charlie talked about was kind of, the health and wellness. Well, there was, let's just say 40% of company CEOs really believed in that. You talk to them, you talk about better air quality, natural light, and they bought into that concept of, yes, healthier, happier employees leads to more productivity. But there was probably only about 40% that believed in that. And some just didn't believe it. I would say what COVID has done is really sped that up. So very few of any CEOs, CFOs, and senior executives don't believe now that, yes, having more natural light, better air quality, things like that are going to lead to healthier, happier employees. Because the reality is, there is a war on talent today. You know, in a Microsoft recent survey, it's at 41% of respondents said they're thinking of making a change in jobs or change in companies.
Yeah.
So that
Tremendous
tells
increase
me that they're really, you know, the place of work is going to come to the forefront of a lot of these people on where they want to work. And so that's real estate is right in the C-suite right now and making a decision on the type of building that they're going to go to.
And maybe this is a question for both you, Lee, and Charlie. How do you see the role of the landlord expanding or changing?
As somebody who conceptualizes and designs and develops the built environment, the physical office ecosystem, you know, we will build in as much flexibility as possible. I mean, another theme here that I think maybe I didn't touch on it earlier is inclusivity. So creating a built environment that obviously is the most equitable and inclusive space for all humans, all occupants of the building. So, for example, at CIBC Square, we have mothers' rooms with refrigeration for breastfeeding mothers. We have an animal relief zone for visually impaired guests and occupants of the building. We have universal and gender neutral washrooms and change rooms throughout the building. So there's a big onus on the landlord to provide as much optionality for our tenant partners to thrive, obviously, but to enable their business to attract and retain the best talent, to enable that talent to be individually and collectively as productive as possible, and then also just to catalyze their and enhance their overall satisfaction within the built environment.
You know what's interesting? You know, if you're hearing like, you know, Charlie talk and you know, and you think about the role of the landlord, like what's really changed is how much onus tenants are putting now on the landlord to provide versus what the tenant would provide, right? Before, the tenant would put all this stuff within their space, right? The landlord would just provide.
I just need a secured building and an elevator to my floor.
Exactly.
And that's what I need.
It's a good location and it's got 4 walls and the tenants, and now the landlords are taking all this onus to be able to provide this type of amenity-rich spaces because tenants are wanting to take, you know, less space, cut down on their real estate costs, but they still want all these amenities. So the building itself is playing such a larger role now than it was in the past.
Michelle, I also wanted to ask, obviously as a design firm, we're involved in a lot of assisting or working with brokerage to assist tenants in searching for real estate, so pre-lease or the feasibility process. And in the past, that's often been very conventional. It's been, what is your program? What is the size you need? Get a general sense of growth and go to and see what's available. But now with this expanded understanding of having to attract employees to come into the office, how do you think that's shifting the role of the designer in those early phases of pre-lease, the feasibility exercises?
Well, I would say from a programming standpoint, the conversation is completely different now. It used to be head count based on level, what the entitlement is based on their role and their function. But now we're really breaking it down differently. You know, we're looking at everything from what are some mission critical or some spaces that need to be more of that assigned, I'm going to say, workplace that is more dedicated to individuals, and then changing the program into more of a conversation about the spaces that are more based on collaboration and the way the teams come together. It's really about this collaboration, meeting spaces. How are they really interacting with those? And that's really taking I'm going to say the forefront of the programming discussions we're having now. The individual spaces are equally as important, but there is definitely a shift. I would also say that there's a lot of conversation right now about the reduction of the footprint. But what we're seeing is there isn't necessarily a reduction of the overall footprint, but it's how it's being utilized that's shifting. And we might still be using the same amount of square footage. but we're giving those spaces now over to the team spaces and the shared spaces rather than the individual. So the square footage per person is now shifting into a much different metric that we're trying to measure.
Right.
And it's funny because pre-COVID, obviously that trend was heading in the other direction in terms of densifying space. And, back to Eric's earlier question on the responsibility of the landlord, HVAC, washroom counts, elevator speeds and capacities. We as a true partner to our tenants and our occupants, again, have a responsibility to future-proof the built environment for their needs. Today, obviously, if there's a slight maybe you said it's not a de-densification, but it's just a different way of using space. If that trend reverses in 15 years, our building the base building infrastructure is able to accommodate anything that tenants can really throw at it, which again is, I think, a big onus and responsibility of the developer.
And I think that's a key going forward, is that ultimate flexibility to be able to adapt and evolve over time, because things will change. 6 months from now, it'll change.
Yeah,
it will be
more of a concern.
Yeah, I think that a lot of this is all supporting that well-being factor. And ultimately, if an employer can demonstrate that they're putting these things into their program, and allowing their space to have this flexibility, it's going to lead to more productivity when people do come into the office, creating less stress, because if things are easy to navigate and people know where to find things or how to use the spaces, and they will do and perform what they need them to do, then that ultimately will be less stressful. And I think that's really something that employees will be looking for, and that will be an attractive part of what they'll be looking for from employers. It will be putting more demands on the employers to provide those affordances.
And I have one more question for the group before we wrap up, but just as advice to landlords out there that I think many are scrambling to think the same thing. How do they reposition or position real estate to attract tenants that are thinking differently? What are advice that you have for landlords that are asking that question?
From a broker perspective, I think, Charlie alluded to it in the beginning, but it's really like, if you think about it, it's all about health, wellness, and the experience now, right? The role of the landlord is now more of a partnership with tenants, right? So, we didn't touch on it, but little things like lease terms are now starting to get a little shorter. Tenants are looking for more from the landlords than before in terms of build it. So I think, again, that the landlords, if they focus on those three things, the health, wellness, and experience in the buildings, but then being that true partner to the tenant community and help them through this whole stage of lifestyle, because everyone will agree, we're not exactly sure how this thing's going to play out in terms of the needs, where we know there's going to be a hybrid, but what exactly does that hybrid look like? I don't think anyone is 100% sure. So the more a landlord could play that partnership role with their tenant, I think the better they're going to have at attracting and then keeping those tenants long term.
Agreed. But I want to thank you for joining me here today.
Thanks, Eric.
Great. Thank you.
Thanks a lot.